Welcome to the Daily Fantasy Basketball Podcast. I am Kyle McEwen. You can find me on Twitter at RotoKyleNBA, and I'm joined by Mark Roberts, who you can find on Twitter at Mark F. Roberts. We're going to continue our Who to Draft With series of podcasts. Today we're going to go with Stephen Curry. So we're going to be talking about a lot of the same kind of things that we were talking about in our last podcast, where we talked about who you would pair with James Harden over the second, third, fourth, and fifth rounds. Taking a look at all the players who would be available in those rounds to say who would be best to pair with this guy based on the fact that Stephen Curry provides all of these kind of stats and whatnot. Mark, why don't we just get right into it, since everybody who's listened to the James Harden podcast is probably pretty familiar with the process here. Steph Curry is going to go in the first, second, or third pick of your draft, most likely. So knowing that, what kind of stats is Steph Curry going to provide for us so that we know where we may have to look in the next couple rounds?
Steph Curry is really good at four different categories from our head-to-head rankings that take into account six categories. Curry is awesome at four of them. He's going to give you outstanding production from the points. He's going to be in the 23 to 24 points per game range. He's going to be near 2 steals a game, which is excellent. He's going to be, 7.5 to 8 assists per game, which is excellent. And he's going to be at like 3.5 3-pointers per game, which probably will lead the league. So from that standpoint, you are getting like dominant production in four of the categories. Now, rebounds and blocks, he's going to be a negative or close to a negative in both of those. Rebounds, he gets more than you would think for a point guard. He gets 4, right around 4 per game. He's not going to help you out at all in blocks. So that's kind of where you're at with him. So, as you think about the next picks, you're all set, or you're as set as you can be after one pick in 4 categories, and you're a little bit deficient in blocks and rebounds. And that's I see you on the screen. You just posted our projection for Curry.
Yep, and then we've got him projected for playing in 78 games. He's been remarkably healthy over the last couple seasons after dealing with ankle issues through his first couple seasons. We've got Curry projected for 33 minutes this season. That's a little bit above I believe it was 32 some odd minutes that he averaged last season. And there's a lot of contention about Curry's projection in that a lot of people think he could play more minutes this season because Golden State was just trouncing so many teams last year that in the fourth quarter of a lot of their games, Curry didn't play, Klay Thompson didn't play because they didn't have to. The Warriors just had such a strong lead going into the fourth. I don't think that you're going to necessarily see these guys play bigger minutes this year, mainly due to the fact that Steve Kerr is the coach. I think the fact that Steph Curry got to about 32 minutes a game last season, the fact that Klay Thompson was about at that same minutes per game, I think that's all by design. I think it's the whole Spurs system mentality of spreading out the minutes or limiting guys' minutes to a certain threshold to keep them healthy throughout the year.
I totally agree. Yeah, and for all those times he didn't play in the fourth quarter, like the game that I went to in Utah, he didn't play in the fourth quarter, but he played all 12 minutes in the third quarter because they knew he wasn't going to play in the fourth quarter. So, even just things like that, maybe they split him up as, 8 minutes and 8 minutes. And then it's not really like, even though he's playing most of the fourth quarter, he's only playing like 4 minutes more in that quarter. And maybe they take a little bit out of the first half. Like I think Kerr's motivation will be more to make sure Curry is healthy going into the playoffs than try to win at all costs. So
I completely agree. And you brought up a great point, and I love that you have like a personal reference of you saying when you were at the Utah game, they played them the whole third quarter. And I'm sure if we went back and we looked, there's probably a common trend there where if the Warriors were on a roll, they would just play a player the whole quarter. We all remember was that a 37-point third quarter out of Klay Thompson last season on a magical night. So, all right. So if we take Steph Curry with our first, second, third pick, same kind of situation that you have with James Harden, it's almost tragically similar because we're going to be talking about a lot of the same players today, but the only real hole that you have in both of these guys' games, in Steph Curry's game, is his blocks contribution because he's giving you good production everywhere else. So one of the things that we talked about, or that we kind of came roundabout to yesterday, when we got done with our conversation, Mark, about James Harden, was that we realized sometime during the second or third round, if we're building a good head-to-head team and we're going to have good blocks to pair with a James Harden, Steph Curry type player, you need to get one of those good blocks guys in the second or third round. I was trying to hammer home that I would just go with Gordon Hayward, go with Victor Oladipo in the second and third round, and those were my main targets. But as we went a little bit deeper and looked at the fourth and fifth round, it became very apparent that if you were picking early in the draft and you don't get a blocks guy like Anthony Davis or DeMarcus Cousins, you're going to have to spend a second or third round pick on a good blocks guy like Rudy Gobert, like Nerlens Noel, like Andre Drummond, like DeAndre Jordan, in order to make sure that you are getting somebody there who's going to be able to contribute throughout the season for you.
Now, what do you think about this? I mean, yes, I totally agree with you. Is Draymond Green good enough at blocks to fit into that category? I think would be the only real question, because we know that, we've projected him for about 1.2 blocks a game. That's roughly what he got last year as well. That's not in the 2 blocks per game or like the close to 3 blocks a game that Anthony Davis and Rudy Gobert are going to get you, but it's definitely a positive. Do you think that's enough to sort of put him in that conversation, or would you exclusively look at those other guys?
I think it depends on who else you might be targeting with your second/third round pick. So say in the second round, you take Draymond Green. If you are going to a little bit later look at taking maybe a Paul Millsap, or for your third round picks, I'd be surprised if you drop that far. It's difficult because
if you could sort of cobble together rebounds and blocks if you focused on a few guys like Green, like maybe if you pick Green and Millsap, you would probably be okay.
I think throughout the course of the draft, you could do well. But if you're looking to balance your team out over the first 4 to 5 rounds, there's going to come a point in the third round. And the hard part is that by the time once you make your third pick at the beginning of the third round, you don't get another pick until the end of the fourth round. And by that time, most of the big blocks guys or the consistent block guys are all gone. Or that's what we gleaned looking at the ADP for Yahoo for this head-to-head example.
Yeah. And there are other block guys like further down, you think Mason Plumlee or someone like that, but they have a lot of deficiencies in their game that puts them way down at the bottom of the rankings.
Right. Roy Hibbert, Tyson Chandler. There's guys down there who later in the draft you can use to fill it out. I know we've both been taking Kristaps Porzingis near the end of our drafts to fill out some of our block needs in hopes that he can get enough minutes right from the get-go. But for the most part, I'm looking to get a blocks guy with my third round pick here when I'm picking with Steph Curry or James Harden at the beginning of the draft. But it could work,
Yeah. So is your best case scenario here that you somehow end up with Paul George, Andre Drummond, or something like that?
You would hope
I think that's your best case scenario.
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe the Paul George thing is just like
you pick Curry third, you pick Paul George 22nd.
Right, and Paul George is going to give you the occasional. Paul George is going to give you the occasional block. So does that put you? Does that put you into the? I guess, geez, OP. Why do I have such an ardent thought process with Paul George where I think he's more of a shot blocker than what he is? Every time I have to double check his stats, and I'm always shocked at the fact that he doesn't get more blocks, given that he has he's 6'11" and whatnot. You're right. Yeah, the best possible situation would have Paul George drop down to you, but then you are in another situation where you need to make sure you get blocks with that third pick. I feel like
case you get Paul George and then you get Andre Drummond or DeAndre Jordan. I think that's your best case scenario here.
Right, and I like Andre Drummond's overall production better because I think he's going to score more than a guy like Rudy Gobert. I think he's going to score more than a DeAndre Jordan. So if I'm targeting a good blocks guy at that point in the draft, that's who I'm looking at. Obviously, Gobert's probably gone by that time.
Yeah, and if Gobert was there, I would actually take him ahead of Drummond. I know that what you're saying about points is definitely true, and that's a big advantage, but I think Gobert just gives you, he's almost going to give you one more block a game, and that difference, the fact that you could just feel like you're getting 12 rebounds and 3 blocks per game out of Gobert, is going to kind of set you in those categories more than I think Drummond's 14 rebounds and 2 blocks per game. But I don't think you can totally. I think I'm picking nits here. Like you can go with either of them. I think you'll be in really good shape.
I agree with you that there is a big distinction there, and I appreciate you for kind of like getting me to sit back and think about that a little bit more, because when you think about somebody getting 2 blocks over 3 games, or 3 blocks per game over 3 games, you're talking about a significant difference throughout in the course of 1 week. So for head to head, that's huge. In the course of 4 games, Drummond would get 8 blocks, whereas if Rudy Gobert just played 3 games that week, he would get you 9 blocks, which means you'd win that category. So that is a very strong distinction for me. I think I'm just too.
He's going to be gone. It's not really even a discussion, I don't think.
It's not, based on where Rudy Gobert was put into the O ranks this season. He's regarded as a top 25 player, and in most regards, he's getting taken in the top 20 picks. So
yeah, and the gap between those two is not as large as where they're going in the average draft position. What I mean by that is I would rather have Paul George and Andre Drummond. Like if I could pick George in the second round and Drummond in the third round, then having to go Rudy Gobert in the second round and then winding up with Victor Oladipo in the third round. I would be happy with both cases, but I would prefer the Drummond, Paul George. And in other words, the difference between Paul George and Oladipo for me is bigger than the difference between Gobert and Drummond.
And if
they're pretty close.
And if you're ever wondering how, when Marc talks about those things, like what's the difference between Drummond and Gobert's value, he's pretty much, you can just reference our auction values on the head-to-head rankings on any of the rankings pages, because that's going to give you an idea of just how close the rankings is. Like we have Drummond ranked 18th in the head-to-head rankings and Gobert ranked 19th, but they're both valued at $32. And we've talked about that before, but I always just like to kind of remind people about it.
Good point.
So if we've settled on, yes, Paul George would be the optimal pick at 22. That's always going to be the case if you have the first pick, is to hope that Paul George comes back down to you. Draymond Green's another great pick. Somebody who has been playing super well in the preseason so far has been Kyle Lowry. He dropped, 40 points last night on like 18 shots for the Raptors. He looks great. He's lost a lot of weight. All his skin is tight and stuff. He's not chubby kid anymore. But do you like Lowry as a top 20 player? We have him ranked as the 17th player. He's going Yahoo ADP of 27. I've had some people ask me about him on Twitter. I guess, what are your thoughts about Lowry? Because when I look at his across the board production, yes, it all adds up to a good sum for fantasy, but he's not the kind of player that I like to have on my team.
So what is it about you? I'll give you my opinion in a second, but what is it about Lowry that you don't like? Is it that his points aren't quite high enough, or his assists aren't quite high? Like, what is it? Can you pinpoint like what you don't like about?
It's exactly that. It's everything.
Those two things.
No, everything is just.
Well, I mean, I think his 3-pointers and assists and steals are very, very, very good, right? Like he's going to get. We've got him projected for 2 threes and 1.5 steals. I don't think that's what's holding you back there. His rebounds are very good for a point guard. He's near 5 a game. I don't think you care about his blocks. So to me, I think what you're saying is you don't like his points and assists are good, but not great for you.
And I don't trust his field goal percentage. Also, we've seen him be a streaky player. You go and look at Kyle Lowry's split stats. He was horrible in the second half of last season. Absolutely trash. So it's really that. It's not feeling like, I know that he gets a lot of hype for whatever reason, and I know that people like him because he's kind of a wrecking ball out there, a little guy fighting up against all these in between all these skyscrapers. But when I look at Kyle Lowry, he's the Markieff Morris of point guards for me. He's just because he does everything just a little bit better than average. He does everything very well, but nothing is elite. So, like when you talk about the fact that Rudy Gobert, his blocks, why getting nearly 1 more block per game than Andre Drummond can be a significant thing. I don't see Kyle Lowry doing anything that makes me feel like he has to do everything well every night to do his best, whereas other players
Does
can
it
go
make you
out.
feel any different to know that he's 10th in our projections for assists per game at 7.1? So 7.1 doesn't feel like a ton, but there's only a few players that are better than him.
There's a lot to like about Kyle Lowry. But I also, it's like I said, he's streaky to me. He's injury prone to me. I think he averaged 5.4 assists for the second half of the season last year. Like it,
That's worrisome.
yeah, exactly. So he's got too low of a floor for me for somebody that you're drafting in the second round of the draft.
So my take, and this won't surprise you, Kyle, is that I don't care about the preseason stuff. Like I generally don't read anything into preseason performance. With that said, I do think those assists are a little better than maybe that's kind of what I was insinuating with my question. They're a little better than you're giving them credit for. Like I would say those are, if you're getting a player who's top 10 in a category and very good in 3 other categories, he's very good in points. He's very good in steals, and he's very good in threes. And then he's a top 10 player in assists. So from that standpoint, I think he can hit those marks, and I think he can be valuable. But I certainly wouldn't want to pair him with Curry in this discussion. I think Curry is way better at all of those things. And then if you don't, I guess you could take Curry, Lowry, and then throw on DeAndre Jordan or Andre Drummond with him. But I would probably rather go with one of the wing guys. Like I would feel better if I would took Hayward or Paul George or even Oladipo than sort of doubling up on what Curry is. Lowry is like a much worse version of Curry.
I think he's like a slightly better Jarrett Jack.
Whoa.
I know, right?
Oh. You're going to get a mean email from Kyle Lowry's mom.
Just not a fan, man. But he does look great, by the way. He does. He should start modeling. But we should, So looking at this second, third round, looks like I know I'm pimping you got to get a blocks guy in the third round. Otherwise, with your second round pick, there's tons of options there. That Gordon Hayward's going to be my favorite. Do you have a favorite other than Paul George, since he's kind of a little bit of an outlier?
I like Draymond Green a lot. I don't know how to sort of make that work with Curry, Draymond Green. And then it's almost like if you go with blocks and rebounds, you don't have enough points. And then if you go with a wing guy, you don't have enough rebounds and blocks. So I don't know that I like that fit. He's almost like too much of an in-betweener there. No, I probably like Hayward. I mean, Bledsoe is really good too. I would probably go with Gordon Hayward. My plan would be pick Curry first in the second round, pick Paul George if I could. If I can't do that, I'm going to go with one of the big guys. I'm either going to get DeAndre Jordan and Drummond and pair him with Gordon Hayward in the third round. So I'm going to try to come out of it with Curry, one of the 2 big guys that are left. If Rudy Gobert's there, that's great too. But one of those big guys that does blocks and rebounds, and then a Paul George, Gordon Hayward, Victor Oladipo type of wing guy. And I'm feeling pretty good about my team through 3 rounds.
Do you put Nerlens Noel in the same conversation as the DeAndre Jordan and Andre Drummond? Like would you consider?
I don't think he's too far off. Yeah, I would think about it if everybody else was gone. I think the difference is the pro is he's going to get a lot of steals, like more steals than any of those guys, which is great. The con is, Rudy Gobert is projected for 12 rebounds a game. Drummond's projected for 14 rebounds a game. Jordan's projected for 14 rebounds a game. We've got Noel below 9 rebounds a game. So it's like his 2 best categories are not rebounds and blocks. His 2 best categories are steals and blocks. And he is like going to be one of the best players ever at being elite in those 2 categories. But since I already kind of got steals with Curry, he doesn't fit nearly quite as well. I probably would just go with Draymond Green, if that makes sense, and take a little bit of a hit in blocks because I know I'm going to get better threes. I'm going to get better assists. I'm going to get a little better or a little worse on blocks, but I'm going to get close to the same amount in steals, and I'm going to get better points. So I'd probably go with Draymond Green over Noel. What about you?
You know what? Sometimes just comparing two players really lets you know where you stand on a guy, because I love Nerlens Noel. I like targeting him. But when you compare him to Draymond Green, I'm with you. Like, where you're going to get more help in more categories from Draymond is better than what you might get that's negligibly better in blocks or rebounds. So no, I really like that. So we're rounding out our team here, and then we're going into the 4th and 5th round, and we've actually thought about this time about making sure we get blocks. So I'm feeling a little bit more bullish on getting another point guard on my team. So if we're going in our 4th and 5th round picks, you can kind of see here where I'm scrolling down right now. These are all the players through Yahoo ADP who, after your 3rd pick and go from the 3rd to the 4th round, these are all the players who are going to go off the board: Paul George, Vucevic, Kevin Love, Marc Gasol, DeAndre Jordan, Pau Gasol, Hassan Whiteside, Brooke Lopez. Tons of big men get gone: Al Jefferson, Chris Bosh, Dirk Nowitzki, Tim Duncan, Derek Favors. Some of Mark's favorite wing players get taken: Trevor Ariza. My favorite wing player of the season, Rudy Gay, he gets taken. But there's tons of good point guards available right after that. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so ardent about getting a Victor Oladipo or a Gordon Hayward with one of my 2nd or 3rd picks, is because I feel like I'm going to be okay getting more assists later. If I had to pick right here, as far as who out of these top picks I would end up taking with my 4th round pick, I'd probably start it off with Reggie Jackson. And that's mainly because, as we talked about last night, and as I've kind of exhausted here, I think there's the potential there for him to get closer to the 9 assists per game that he was getting last season with the Detroit than the 7 or so, 7.5 that we have Reggie projected for. Who would you be looking at with your 4th and 5th pick here?
I think Reggie Jackson's a good one to target. I think you're right. I mean, I have no real defense of saying why his assists are where they are, except for we don't have that many games of watching him in Detroit. But if I had to if I had to personally pick over under on his assists, I'd probably go a little higher than the 7.5. It's just that there was such wildly different production from Jackson in Oklahoma City and Detroit. It's mathematically a little bit difficult to sort of pick a number there. I tell you what, for me, I think pick 5 is an easy pick for me. I'm going Mirotic. I like pairing him with some of those big guys. He's a little bit more versatile. So like if I can get Drummond and his 14 rebounds, and then I can put Mirotic next to him, and I sort of get 21 total rebounds out of the 2 of them, and I'm getting Mirotic's 1 steal and 1 block and 2 3-pointers a game as well. And his high scoring potential, I really like pairing him there. So I'd be happy to pick him in the 4th round, but I think where he's going in at Yahoo average drafts, I think you're fine to wait for him in the 5th round. So from there, I think you can talk about point guards, and really I think Reggie Jackson's a good option. I like Elfrid Payton. I know you have some concerns about him. The difference between those players really is that Jackson's going to score more and Payton's probably going to get more steals. And where we put a premium on points, probably Jackson is the right pick. I like taking Evans. I'd also think about Wiggins, though. Maybe he's the guy that we haven't really talked about. This is going to be your only chance to draft Wiggins. Like, there's a chance that Tyreek Evans is there, for example, on the way back. If his Yahoo average draft position is 80, he might be there on your 6th pick. But Wiggins is not going to be there. If you want a player like Wiggins and you think he fits nicely in with what Curry and Gordon Hayward, for example, is going to give you, and I think he could, that's a good place to take him maybe in that 4th round.
Well, we're looking at our top ranked players here who are available, but as we see here, you can also look at the Yahoo ADP that we've got for all these guys, and a lot of the guys that we have ranked high are going much later on Yahoo. So you might be able to get them in the 6th or 7th round, even if you're looking at a Nikola Mirotic or an Elfrid Payton or a Reggie Jackson or Ricky Rubio. So if you think that you can get some of these assist guys later still, then yeah, I'm going to look even harder at Andrew Wiggins, who's got a ADP of 57, because even though I might value Nikola Mirotic more than I value Andrew Wiggins, if I think I can end up getting both of them, then why not try to see if I can do that? You're gonna be weighing that against who you're playing in the league against. If it's a bunch of your, hometown friends who maybe don't pay attention a lot, your sister's, your brother-in-law is essentially in the league. So, and he got forced in there, and he wanted to because he was in the football league or whatever. If you're in that situation, you might be able to take advantage of some of these kind of like market inefficiencies on Yahoo or other places.
So, you and I are saying we'd take Reggie Jackson and Mirotic in the 4th and 5th round, but imagine if you could get him in the 6th and 7th round. And
right.
Then you can throw in Goran Dragic and Andrew Wiggins or someone along with him, or I don't know, just throwing out an example. By the way, I like Goran Dragic. I think he has an opportunity to return to his Phoenix level production in Miami.
And as we can see here, he's got, he's like the top ranked ADP guy. Like he would be the first one going off the board here out of all these guys. So I don't hate any of these picks. I wouldn't take Danny Green just because he's not a guy whose ceiling I like. I get it. He puts up good across the board production, but there's so many high ceiling guys available still here that I'm not going to take a guy who's kind of a wet napkin like Danny Green is. So
the one thing I will say about Danny Green is if you sort of like went the Draymond Green route earlier and didn't get an elite blocks guy, he's the type of player that can give you solid blocks production from the guard position. Like we've got him projected for 1 block a game. Doesn't sound like much, but Jimmy Butler, for example, who's next to him in our rankings, it's going to take him 10 games to get a block probably. So he just blocks a lot of shots for his position, and that can kind of, if you're looking to make up for that category, that's probably where you take Danny Green.
If let's just say earlier in my draft, I didn't, or let's say I'm happy here. I know that out of all these guys, Nikola Mirotic is gone. Like some of the guys that I like are just gone, but I still know I can get some of my assists later in the draft. I might go for a Greg Monroe with my 5th round pick because I really liked his production. I don't think
he's too much farther down.
No, we've got him ranked at like 60 for our rankings.
Yeah.
And Greg Monroe
is at $50 or $15, and Wiggins is at $17. So that would be you're not losing much, if any, value there.
Right. And maybe that's the key thing about us talking about the fact that some of these guys you can target in the 4th or 5th round are the same guys that you can target in the 6th and 7th round. It's because there's just not that much value difference. It's all a wash here. You're taking more so based on who you think can produce better this season than what they have last season or whatever it is that brought them to getting the projection they got right now. And that's maybe one reason why I'm not bullish on a guy like Monte Ellis, because I don't expect him to do more than what he's done in the past, but I know he's still going to be a decent player. Monte Ellis is more a guy who I would target in an auction draft because I feel like you're going to get a discount on him in an auction, but in these snake drafts, sometimes it just it's hard to get value unless you're willing to kind of draft somebody earlier than you have to, which is a weird contradiction.
How do you feel about taking Whiteside in the 4th or 5th round if you missed out on, or he already went? Never mind. That's where he's on our rankings. He's 31 on the year.
But that's worth talking about because Hassan Whiteside's getting drafted 31 overall on Yahoo, and are you drafting this guy at all right now?
There's just not a lot of value there. I mean, look at our projection for him. I think it's a fair projection. We've got him for 13 points, 11.5 rebounds, 2.7 blocks. So that feels pretty elite. But he's sort of like so poor in the other 3 categories, even more so than his counterparts where you would normally lump him in with those other guys, that he's 54th in our rankings.
We have Hassan Whiteside projected for 0.1 assists per game.
That might be high based on his production. Like he does not pass the ball at all. And you might say like, well, my center's always bad at assists, so I don't care. You can't really look at it that way. Like you would say there's a big difference between, Chris Paul and Kyle Lowry, but that's like the same difference as between Whiteside and, I don't know, Drummond, or no, Drummond's not a good example. He's not good at, but Drummond and, or excuse me, Whiteside and Gobert. Like there's basically a 2 assist difference there.
There's enough
over the course of 4 games. That's 8 assists in a week that you have to make up for because your center is Hassan Whiteside. And that's just one of the reasons that he's down this far. Another one is like, he's just such a wild card.
Right. There's so many red flags with this guy. He's had emotional issues over the years. He's been in and out of the league for what seems to be not a talent issue. He's got a great NBA body that he's developed into over the years. He's still young. There's a lot of things.
Keep telling people is he didn't get good last year. Like he didn't just magically, like it's not a Space Jam issue where he touched like a magic basketball and talent flew into his body. He's always been really good. It's just that he's never been able to sort of fit within the NBA program. And I get it. Like if anybody's going to help him, it's probably Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra in the Heat, but he's still a wild card.
And they tried to fix Michael Beasley for like a decade, and he still had to go to China 3 times to, make his body and mind come right. So there's a lot of question marks with Hassan Whiteside. We even saw during the summer, the team's assistant coaches or somebody talking about how they plan to play him somewhere between 24 to 28 minutes a game, essentially. And then when you think about the way that team is built and things like that, you can see them wanting to go with Chris Bosh a lot at center. So if they do push Chris Bosh to center quite often, then you're going to get less minutes for Hassan Whiteside. So there's just enough question marks for me to say I'm not drafting Hassan Whiteside this year, especially in snake drafts. If I could get him cheap enough in an auction league, that could be said about pretty much any player. If I can get him cheap enough in an auction league. But in a snake draft, Hassan Whiteside going 31st overall on Yahoo ADP, not happening for me. And ADP is average draft position for anybody who's not hip. So all right. I mean, we talked about it. There's a bunch of different options you could go with for once you get to your 4th and 5th round picks. And it's all it's about team construction. So Mark, is there anything else you want to add to this?
No, man, good discussion.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening to the Daily Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Once again, I'm Kyle McEwen. You can find me on Twitter at RotoKyleNBA. And this is
Mark Roberts. And you can find me on Twitter at Mark F. Roberts.
Our theme song is Happiness is All the Rage by The Promise Ring. You can find their music on jadetree.com. We love you. Have a good day. Please visit our site at dailyfantasybasketballpodcast.com. Please rate and review the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, Podcast Addict, whatever it is you use. We'd very much appreciate that. That helps us. If you enjoy our content, you want to use our rankings that are free on our website, and you feel like you want to donate, that's super dope too. If you want to do that, we've got a PayPal donate button on the website on dailyfantasybasketballpodcast.com. Now I feel like I've said too much shilling. All right. We love you guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.